Hello and welcome to Hare and the Hawthorn. My name's Kate Ray and I'm your host, and I have with me my lovely co-host, don't know which side is on to you, Neil Rushton, and we're going to be addressing one of the questions that I'm asked infrequently, but I am asked this quite regularly about the places where fairies dwell, places that I've visited that I feel are fairy places. And Neil and I are going to talk about those places that we have either had encounters or are famous fairy places that we have visited and give you a bit of a rundown. Now, Neil, if you don't mind, I'm going to start off with, and excuse my French listeners, I'm going to start off with the shittest one that I've been to, just so that the rest of the world can avoid this like the plague, or not, or petition the local council. So last year I went to Cottingley. It was on my tick
Tick
list.
list.
Tick
Tick list.
list. That's a good one. That's a new one. It's on my tick list for places to go. So for my birthday last year, I decided that I was going to take myself up into Yorkshire and go and visit the very famous site of the Cottingley Fairies, which all intents and purposes, and I'm sure many of you will have this in your mind, that it's an enchanting, gently meandering. Oh, shall we just start this again? Meandering river, brook, stream, depending on its size of where it flows, through a gorgeous, idyllic British countryside. But no, they've built a housing estate, literally buttered up to the sides of the river, to which to get down to the famous bit where the photos were taken, you have to kind of scrabble down an embankment, hopping over a public wall, or but hopping over a wall to scrabble yourself down to that side of the river. Disappointing, to say the least. Felt no fairies there, couldn't be further from an idyllic place. Went up into Cottingley to think, oh, maybe, the village, or I don't even know whether it's termed as a town now, but the village might have something that's enchanting about it. It had a sign, and it's a beautifully made sign, that's probably about 4 foot in the middle of the village, in a village green, with a laser cutout of the girls and a fairy. And one of the locals has taken it upon themselves, which made me giggle, which probably shouldn't, but added a soup's on of more shitness to the shit experience, had added a pair of horns and a moustache to one of the girls. So if you have on your wish list, tick wish, um, to go and see the site of the Cottingley Fairies, I'm warning you now, you'll be disappointed unless shit venues are your thing. So that's my opening gambit. You top that one, then Neil.
Well, thanks for starting off with the negative there, Kate. Isn't that one of the rules of podcasts? You never sort of go in with a negative. But I know what you meant.
Hold on, there's rules to podcasting.
Oh yeah. We're the professionals. We should be following it. I know what you mean about Cottingley. I went there many years ago. Um, that's a phrase I find myself saying more and more these days. Many years ago, as you get older. This must have been in the 90s. And I didn't know anything about the new estate, which was probably built in the 70s, 80s.
I don't know that.
I,
I mean, it looks
I don't
fairly
know.
modern, but
So,
to
someone will correct us on that, but it looked to me like 70s, 80s estate, and I knew nothing about this. Like you, I was expecting some shallow valleyed idyll, and it definitely wasn't. It was this terrible. But yeah, so well, okay, Cottingley, not for people who are really into the fairy stuff, the fairy lore, it's such an iconic story that you should probably go there, but don't plan on spending a whole day there or even an afternoon. It's something you go and tick the box. Yeah, no, I've been to Cottingley. I've been where the girls were where this happened, but hey. So shall I talk about some more exciting places?
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah.
or do you want to
Shall I offset that with
m-
something?
exactly, you offset
Okay,
it,
I'll offset
make
it.
up for that
I will
negative.
make up for that negative.
Go for it.
So that particular holiday, when we're in that area, I had been going through, and I'm still going through, and I think I'll spend my life going through Rob Wildwood's Magical Britain book, which is always in the car. And it is if I go anywhere and I've got a spare afternoon or whatever, I'll get the book out and see if there's anything around and about. So from the book, and it's something that I hadn't heard of before as a place, I went to Janet's Foss. Now, in comparison to going to see the Cottingley, which is, enormously famous, going to Janet's Foss, which is a really gorgeous waterfall in the middle of the Dales. And that was just breathtaking, absolutely breathtaking. We had the opportunity to have the place to ourselves for a good few hours. It gets very, very busy apparently on weekends, and especially in the summer, it's a lovely place to swim. It was far too cold when I went there. So that association is with Janet or Jenny or Jeannie, which is colloquial for fairy. Now, I got the feeling, so I waded through to the waterfall. So there's this beautiful pool. I waded through to the waterfall, and apparently she lived or lives behind the waterfall. And I very much got the feeling that I was being naughty by peeking behind the waterfall, and I got this sense of that I should call her out. And I remember standing there and saying, Jenny Foss, Jenny Foss, and I couldn't say the third. I couldn't say it a third time because I just thought, do I really want to summon this fairy out? So super exciting place, absolutely gorgeous surrounding area, stunning in its own right. Definitely worth a visit on my top five.
Brilliant. Again, I've been there many years ago, and it's certainly one of those magical places, isn't it? Yeah, I'd love to go there again. So, so I'm going to bring this in. I hope this doesn't sound too egotistical, but I'm going to talk about three places to begin with that I have personally experienced fairy type entities. And yeah, so two of them are quite famous sites, very famous sites where anyone can go and perhaps plug into the energy that's there and maybe experience fairies for yourself. And the third is not a famous site, and you can't go there because it's my living room. Only I'm allowed in my living room. I'll explain that in a moment. So the first site is West Kennet Longbarrow in Wiltshire, part of the famous Avebury complex with Silbury Hill, the Swallowhead Springs. There's another East Kennet Longbarrow, obviously the stone circle of Avebury and the Stone Rose. An amazing site. It's just the energy of that place. Even the least psychic amongst us will feel something if you turn up at Avebury. It's a very, very special place. Um, Now, I've written about it and talked about my first experience of a fairy type entity at West Kennet Longbarrow. So I'm not going to, there are other places you can go and find out the details, but it was the first time in 1996 in summer when I was in the Longbarrow. There's a chamber which originally contained burials from the Neolithic period, about 3,500 BC. And you can go in there. It's fully excavated. There are no burials there now, obviously. And I sat in the end chamber and experienced a fairy type entity whilst meditating. And that fairy type entity, as I've explained before, was very much in the form of a Brian Frood type fairy, about a foot tall, that archaic dress, mischievous face, and there was interaction. There was no sound interaction, but there was eye to eye contact with this being that lasted around about a minute, maybe a little bit less than a minute. And that sort of set me. I'd been reading about fairies, and I knew about Brian Frood's fairies before that, which may have predisposed me to see that type of entity, whatever that energy being was. But from that moment on, I realized that under certain circumstances, if you alter your state of consciousness in any way, in this case meditation, there is a chance that you can plug into whatever you want to call it, a different reality, a different dimension, an other world, just something that is outside of everyday normal reality.
Mhm.
And that was a massive eye opener for me. The first time that happens to you, you don't forget it, and it informs the way you see life and reality after that. So West Kennet Long Barrow, I can't guarantee that anyone pitching up at West Kennet Long Barrow is going to affect, although there are several other people who have. So I can't guarantee that, but I can guarantee that you will absolutely love that place, and it has a magical, very, very benign atmosphere, as opposed to the barrow about 1 kilometre away called East Kennet Long Barrow, which hasn't been excavated. It's got you can see it from West Kennet Long Barrow. It's covered with trees, and you're not supposed to go there. It's on private land, but a few years ago, I did go there and spent about an hour there. There's a very malevolent atmosphere at that place,
Mhm.
or I found it malevolent. So I'm not quite sure what's going on there. Um, but we're not proposing that anyone trespasses on private land.
No.
So definitely don't go to East Kennet Long Barrow. So West Kennet Long Barrow. The second one, even more famous site, which everyone will know about, is Glastonbury. And not the festival, but Glastonbury town. And I was, again, this was later, this was 2000 maybe, 2000 and maybe even a bit later than that, mid 2000s. And I was camping. I pitched the tent up in a campsite called the Old Oaks campsite, which is about a kilometre away from Glastonbury Tor. And well, talking about altering our states of consciousness, I had taken an psychedelic amphetamine called DOI. Don't ask me to give the full pronunciation of that. It's one of the few psychedelic amphetamines. And well, I laid outside my tent. It was a beautiful summer day. And in the bush, which was right next to the tent, very different types of fairies appeared. More kind of twee and tiny, inches high, no wings, but moving about that bush in a very prehensile way. This carried on for an hour, and there was sometimes eye contact. Again, no sound. There's no audio contact with these beings, whatever they were, and that to me, well, obviously I'd altered my state of consciousness, but the magic of Glastonbury, which can work both ways. Kate and I both know this. There's a black and white energy to Glastonbury. To the very, very good feeling of bliss got from that occasion was beyond compare. And that was only the second time that I experienced fairy type entities. Um, so Glastonbury, I mean, everyone should turn up to Glastonbury anyway, because there's so much to see and do there, and it's such a magical place. Everyone knows all about Glastonbury who's watching this, I'm sure. Now, the third place is not quite so exciting. Like I say, it's my living room.
Your living room.
Which is always where this happens. Again, as I've talked about before, so I'm not going to go into any detail. I have a visual impairment, and on the back of that visual impairment, which happened in late 2015, I have something called Charles Bonnet syndrome, which means that every now and then, and since 2015, it's happened almost every week. Sometimes there's a bit more of a lull in it, but I will experience fairy type entities turning up when it's in a dark and not in a complete dark, but at night with the lights on, and they will turn up almost always in my living room. I'm not sure why they have a preference for my living room. Even when it was happening before where I live now, it was always in the living room. So in the kitchen, doesn't seem to happen. Don't ask me why that is. And these fairy type entities, again, they're very Frood-like. Am I predisposed to see whatever they really are as Frood fairies? Maybe. But they do turn up, and these instances there is audio as well as visual, and they will often talk to me, but rarely listen to me. I can't. I have tried asking them questions. Nothing comes back ever. But they will tell me things, usually to do with calming down your anxiety. Just stay calm. Don't worry about it. What are you worried about? Just be happy. Just like us. It's just lovely. And a lot of people with Charles Bonnet syndrome are absolutely terrified of what they see in their peripheral faded vision. There are some horrible examples, and most people are terrified about this. The official NHS explanation for what they are, they're hallucinations because you've lost part of your vision. Um, I don't think they're hallucinations. Hallucinations is a silly word anyway. What's an hallucination? These beings are real, and they turn up. I interact with them. Never lasts for more than a minute or so. Sometimes less time, and that there they are, and it's become part of my life. I like it. I like this vision into another world, into another reality, which is somehow interacting with my everyday reality. Always happens alone, by the way. And I've come to enjoy it. It's when they turn up, all right, here you are. It's great to see you guys. And it is always a group. It's never one on their own. It's always two or three or four of them. That lasts, and then they disappear into a sort of geometric pattern, and that's gone. And I always do feel a sense of calmness after it's happened. Whatever's gone before, after they've come and they've gone, I feel a sense of calmness. So
having said that, Neil, I must say that this is not an invitation for people to rock up and to meet the fairies in your living room. So please don't track Neil down in some kind of stalkerish way just to meet the fae, because that'd just be too weird, and I think he'd have every right to call the police. So it's not an
I,
invitation. I'm saying that for legal reasons. And if
I,
you
I, I
go
never
on,
give my address out online, Kate.
good. I tell you what, people are brilliant though. People are brilliant at finding things out, especially women. Don't mean to be sexist, but we're all inch high private eyes when it comes to things. Anyway.
Actually, this is starting to sound not so bad.
I didn't mean to say it like that. Anyway, if you want to find out more about Neil's experience with West Kennet and his Charles Bonnet syndrome and the experiences that he's had with the Fae, I did an interview with him before I snaffled him as a co-host. So if you look back down the videos, you'll be able to find Neil talking really in depth about that West Kennet. I want to take that as a jump off point, if you don't mind, Neil, and because I find ancient sites, burial sites, and specifically stone circles particularly hard to tune into. I'm not going to go into Glastonbury and a rant about Glastonbury, because we do have very different experiences with Glastonbury. But those kind of sites for me, and I do put it down to the fact that I find this is going to sound way hippie, but I find stone energy, even crystal energy, far too slow for me. I don't get the same kind of energy boost from them in a way that other people do. I see people. I've had a couple of instances where I went to a dolmen in France, and I put my hand on the dolmen, and it wasn't a psychic thing that I got, and I got electric shock from it. And this was in the middle of a farmer's field. It wasn't in a built up area or anything. So that was one instance, but it's very rare that I can sit and slow down enough to be able to tune into that energy. However, one of my first fairy experiences in the real world, in the material world, happened in between the Uffington Horse and Wayland Smithy, and Wayland Smithy's famous burial ground. I will go there time and time again. It was my number one fairy spot, my number one magical place to go in this country up until recently. It has literally just been knocked off the top. Literally last week it was knocked off the top. And my experience that I had there was with a what I call a sod, because it looked like it should be a little clump of earth. I called it a gnome for many, many years, but it wasn't a gnome. So Whaling Smithy, the Uffington Horse, that area for me does it every time. Going down into Whaling Smithy, coming across, there's a threshold of a copse of trees before you get into where the burial mound is. There is a palpable difference in energy as you come off the track, as you step through those copse of trees. And I always felt, even from being a teenager and having that experience, I always felt that that was a very elf-like energy, but a real, not malevolent, but authoritarian elf energy, that they were watching and they were making sure that nobody was stepping out of line and this was their land. Always has that feeling. I have tried at Whaling Smithy to do some paranormal research before, put equipment on, etc., but not got anything back. It's even a place where I've laid down and tried to tune into the energy of the place. I do find it, like I say, very, very difficult. So I'm going to leave what knocked it off the top slot until my very last one. One of the other places that I want to talk about, I've recently discovered that I tune in a lot better to water energy, so rivers, streams, etc., running water as opposed to lakes. Not so much the sea, although I have warmed to those kind of energetic areas. And I went last week to Cornwall to visit some fairy places. And one of the places that really blew me away and is not so much a fairy place, but has lots of associations with it. It's going to be something that I'm going to do a bit more digging with, is Goliath's Fall. And that is just around the corner from Jamaica Inn on Bodmin. And it was just an off chance day that we said, should we just go and visit? And we spent hours there, hours. The surrounding woodland is magnificent. It was getting quite busy. There is a safe path that you can take, and that kind of stops in a viewing point. If you're a little bit more daring, you can take I'm not great at scrambling, so if I could do it, I would say that, most people, able-bodied people, could have a go. But I scrambled around, and I was sat in one spot, and I kept seeing in the rocks to the side as the river meandered, and it was splashing up water up these rocks, but I could see this bright blue, electric blue light that would glow incredibly intense and then fade out and come back white. And I was really quizzical about, am I seeing through the rock? Is there a hole and I'm seeing something on the other side that's deceptive? Is there something stuck in that particular rock? And it must have been going on for 5 or 6 minutes, just coming in and out, just really, really bright. Had another witness. By the time we'd said we should be really videoing this, of course, as it happens, nothing happened after that. So scrambled round down the river to get to the other side to come on top of where this rock was. No hole, nothing wedged, nothing there that would indicate anything. Not saying it was fairy, but it was really magical to watch, because I couldn't explain what I was seeing. Like I say, that whole area it was just absolutely enchanting. One more and then I'll pass it back over. So I was saying about water. Recently, over the last probably 2 years, I've seriously warmed up to shorelines and their references to the Fae. And last year, another one in North Yorkshire was Boggles Hole, or Boggles Cave, which is Robin Hood's Bay. And it's one of those places where I don't know whether it had been put in my mind about the malevolence of the place, but it's got a seriously dark energy to it. It's quite a large cave opening. It's right on the beach on Robin Hood's Bay. So I clambered to the back, and it does get quite dark at the back. It's not particularly deep, but there was a shallow pool right at the very, very back that was absolutely squirming with maggots. And there was nothing in there that they were eating. There was no, you'd expect maybe a dead seagull or a fish that had washed up, and the place was dripping at the back with maggots. But it had that kind of really weird energy to it, like dark and decaying energy. That place really, really intrigued me. So definitely one for people to visit at the seaside, and that part of the country is fantastic and very very littered with boggles and hobgoblins and Mother Shipton's caves and all that kind of thing. So it's a good one to go and see.
You say if anyone wants to go to visit, you haven't exactly sold that one, have you? As go and see the maggots.
No, but did you not see the grin on my face? This is the thing. It's like those sort of cheeky, mischievous to slightly darker, and I'm like, it's exciting, Give me
Yeah, yeah,
cotton your faeries, and I'm saying it's shit, but give me that kind of that darker, cheekier side, and I'm like, I need to explore.
yeah. No, I've definitely never been there. That's yeah, yeah, interesting. So let's just briefly before I give you one more example and maybe just spread out the concept of what we're talking about a little bit. Um, and in a shameless piece of self-promotion, I have just written fresh off the press today on my Dead But Dreaming blog site, an article called "The Connection Between Fairies and Prehistoric Sites." It's about 5,000 word article, and it's looking at the folklore, modern testimonies of people interacting with fairies at various prehistoric sites, and then I go into a little bit more of an esoteric thing about what that could be. So if you want to go and see, follow up all the references on the fairies connection with prehistoric sites, that's the place to go. I guess this is Leslie Grinzel's, which was the inspiration for me doing that. It's fantastic, but really hard to get hold of, I'm afraid. But it's that will give you lots of examples. He's even got a distribution map of fairies at prehistoric sites, which I used as my starting point for this article. And I was talking to Kate just before we started the video about how I had to limit what I was talking about in terms of the esoteric. Um, I didn't go into ley lines and energy patterns around these sites, which are definitely there because, well, that's a follow-up article.
Mm.
That's something that needs to come on the back of it. But for now, that 5,000 word article is kind of a kind of a base talking about various prehistoric sites.
It's very good. It's very readable, and you have crammed in a heck of a lot of reference points and places where people can do their own research. But on a standalone, it is very readable. It is very readable. It's not often that I read things on the internet. I like things in front of me and on paper, but I read it and it captivated me. And I'm not just saying that because you're my co-host. I'm saying that because it was very well written. So
Well, everything I write is very readable.
it's brilliant.
Oh, absolutely. Um, but my final example, and like I say, I'll spread this concept out a little bit. And after saying I'm not going to tell you where I live, I do live on Wirral in Merseyside, very close to the River Mersey, actually. And one of my favourite haunts of an afternoon, if the weather's okay, is a place called Vale Park. And it's quite a small park, but it's a lovely park right on the banks of the Mersey. Loads of big mature trees there, and there's a kind of peace about the place. Now, the first thing is that the guy who owns the lodge house there is a carver. He's a carpenter, but he carves beautiful horses, animal images, and fairy houses. And there's I don't know who's doing it, whether it's him or someone else, but there's a load of text written on big stones about how this is a place for the fairies, and
Oh.
obviously it's aimed at children. That's and every time you walk through, there are children there. Go, oh, look at the fairies! Look at the fairies! Because this guy's carved little kind of fairy-like beings and put them in little notches in the houses. It's kind of charming. It's not it's that could be really naff, couldn't it? But
Mm.
it's charming, and he's a very good carver. Some of these carvings just will blow you away looking at it. So a lot of people will call it the fairy park. And now this is where we get on to just extending the concept. I won't spend long on this because it's something I'm sort of cogitating at the moment about how this is that okay, so this guy has carved all these fairies and the kids come along and they see fairies. But is he plugging unconsciously, perhaps, into a deeper resonance of that place? And he is just manifesting it in a material way so that people can see it in carved wood beings. But really, those carved wood beings are simply representative of an underlying deeper reality within that particular place for whatever reason.
Mm.
And the other thing I've noticed whilst laying down reading a book, usually on one of the grass banks in Vale Park, I have a very favourite tree. It's a sycamore tree with a very interesting big long bark, very mature sycamore tree. And I have been seeing more and more what is usually called pareidolia
Mm-hmm.
within the trunk of this tree and even the branches of the tree. And last week I had a special magical episode where I just put my book down, just staring at the tree, the sun dappling through the leaves, and there were a series of these pareidolia. It wasn't just one that you can say, oh well, that just, you're just making this up, making it look like a face. And they kept changing around the bark of the tree, and this went on 5 minutes or so. And that started me thinking, based on a few weeks ago when I was with Kate and some others in Wallerton Park in Nottingham, where we were talking about pareidolia, and how again that is actually a representation of what those fairies, spirits, entities that are attached to that tree, they're just being represented in physical reality by what we usually think of as pareidolia, whereas actually they're there, and that's the only interface they have between their world and our world, and that's how we see them. And if I were in perhaps a little bit more of an altered state of consciousness, I would see through those pareidolia, what we think of as pareidolia, and see the real beings
Mm.
that are behind them. That's the way I'm starting to think of. There's there's an Eastern European guy called Marco Problachuk. Don't ask me to pronounce his second name, who talks about this extensively in his books about nature spirits. And he's saying the same sort of thing. You just need to be in a state of mind, some kind of state of consciousness where you see beyond what you
Mm.
think that looks like a face in that tree. You see beyond it. And he's very psychically, a lot of psychic ability he has,
Mm-hmm.
and he is able to see beyond it and communicate with these entities. So that's just my quick story, and that little bit of a conceptual leap into pareidolia and representations, physical manifestations in a place that could be signifying something at a much deeper level. And in this case, Vale Park in Wallasey on Merseyside, right by the banks of the River Thames. I shouldn't be advertising it
You
because
shouldn't. You're going to get
I like
stalkers.
I like having the place to myself. It's it. Don't want
Isn't
not too many people sitting around.
isn't it fascinating though how I mean for me woodlands are without a doubt
Yeah.
any woodland is absolutely charged for me energetically on that level, and I am more probably in tune with woodlands than I am with stone circles and burial mounds and what have you. But I find it very, very interesting that woodlands really captivate people to almost become conduits for the Fae realm, to be inspired to do things like carvings. And I've spoke before about during lockdown how many of the woodlands that I was visiting on my exercise time that was dutifully given to me by by the government. We won't get into that. I was seeing more and more fairy houses. They weren't in fields, or they weren't by lakes or rivers. They were in woodlands that people were placing fairy doors around the bottom of trees. And they are captivating places. And very briefly before I go into my number one slot at the minute, Sherwood Forest was one of my very, very few smatterings of fairy encounters. That was only about 10, 11 years ago. I was walking through Sherwood Forest. I grew up in the area. I know the woods really, really well, and I know that there is definitely different energy pockets that go off in that woods. You know, there are places where you're feeling watched, there are places where you don't feel welcome, and there are places that are quite mundane. And I find around the Major Oak quite a mundane place to walk. There are too many. It's too peoply for me. It's way too peoply for me. But I was passing up that way as I was coming out of the forest, and I actually saw what I would consider to be a sylph. It was a light-bodied sylph. So I would say any woodland that you connect to deeply, and any woodland that you spend time in, you do get a sense of the energies and the pareidolia within it. I mean, all the time now I'm picking up and thinking that looks like a dragon, that fallen tree looks like a dragon. And then you do get this idea of, is that tree trying to communicate something with the outside world? You know, it may not be the spirit of the animal that's with that tree, but it could be trauma response that tree's, you know, giving energy. It's mind boggling. So for me, number one, what kicked off Wayland Smithy off the top? I can't talk anymore. Top slot of Kate's fairy places. And again, last week, it was an experience that I had last week, and not particularly fairy, but a very, very fairy place was Wistman Wood. Again in Cornwall, a place that had been.
No, it's in Devon.
It's on the border, isn't it? Because
Yeah.
we were in Cornwall, we were kind of hopping backwards and forwards. Sorry, Devon. I don't want people to go.
Claire Clacy will have you on that one.
Oh yeah, she will. Bless her. I was speaking to her as well. So I was expecting to go and it to be quite a large bit of woodland, quite a large acreage. I'd even read the acreage of Wistman Wood, but I convinced myself it was going to be Fengorn Forest or whatever. It's very, very small, and it would take you no time at all to walk round if if your heart wasn't in being there. But managed to spend the whole day there. I say managed, it wasn't a hardship, because you can't actually walk through the middle anymore. Now you can, but they've put up little signs everywhere saying, please do not walk through the middle of the woods because it's a delicate ecosystem, which I completely understand. We'll have another discussion about this kind of thing another day, I think. So I did a lot of sitting around the periphery. I did bob into bits, but very, very carefully and with barefoot. So I didn't go trotting in with my great big boots on. But the very first bit, I sat down to have a cup of coffee and just to admire the place. It's in a beautiful, gentle valley with a stream at the bottom. And there are massive slabs of stone that are absolutely riddled with quartz. You know, they're just seams of quartz going through. So I sat down, and me saying just then about not having experiences with rocks and stone, absolutely gorgeous, gorgeous warm day, the first warm day that we'd had. And I decided to lay down with my back on the stone and just see what I could absorb out of the atmosphere. And I was instantly hit by the energy that was radiating from underneath me, which was it made my body hum. That's the only way I could describe it. And just this, I just relaxed and melted into the stone. I'm sorry if you can hear my dog barking. She's on cat patrol. So walking around the outside of the wood, this real sense of peace and relaxation just stayed with me the entire time. I'll give you a brief sort of view of Wistman's Wood. It's they're very, very small stunted oak trees, very, very old stunted oak tree, and they're a specific kind, but I can't remember off the top of my head what they are. And they kind of grow in and around these huge, great big. They're not even boulders, the slabs. And there is within the centre, there is a maze, I think, that's carved into. There's supposedly Neolithic carvings, and it's got Druid connections. But I kind of, I respected the little signs and didn't go into the middle. So that's knocked off Wayland Smith. They didn't have a fairy encounter, but the energy of the place definitely warrants going and invoking, I think. And I'm sure Claire Casey, I'm sure she said to me that she had her first fairy experience there, her first pixie experience. So there are pixies about.
Yeah, Westminster Wood is a very special place. It's I'm sure the fairy entities that are inhabiting that particular place are actually quite glad that there aren't humans stomping around in that very, like you say, very delicate piece of ecosystem. My view is that shutting off areas is usually a bad thing, but
Mm.
if you're a respectful person, there's not going to be a problem. But as we know, there are a lot of disrespectful people, and so it's always a balance. But like you say, that's a conversation for another time. um that's great. That's great. I'm so glad you got that. That was the first time you went to Westminster, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, because it's always been so far away from where I've been living that actually making the journey down there specifically has been near impossible, really. So, but the last few years, it's definitely been for me a bit of a mission to go to as many different places as I can, and lots that are off the beaten track that I'd never even come across or heard of before, which has been an absolute marvel. And some gems like Goliath Falls, I can imagine it being super, super busy in holiday times, super, super busy. It was a Sunday, actually. I went on a Sunday and it wasn't too bad. And it was a hot Sunday, but I think everybody had gone out to the beaches, to the coast, to lap up some sun on the beach. So
Yeah.
Goliath
So
Falls, definitely, and Janet's Foss, definitely, and Wistman Woods.
great. Well, I think we're going to wrap it up soon, aren't we? But just to uh, we've been talking about special places, and obviously other people will, leave them in the comments anywhere that you've been that you felt a special resonance to. Um, and
Oh, I think you're frozen.
that you can experience the other world, whatever. Oh, can you see me now?
Yes, you're good. You're good. Give back.
I'm back. Yeah,
You're
it's saying
back.
my connection is unstable for some reason. The takeaway from this is that you can experience these things anywhere. It's your state of mind is actually more important than the place you are. Those places can enhance it, no doubt about it. There are special places, some of which we've been talking about, but it's trumped. It's made not as important as your state of mind.
Mm,
Um, and whether that's, however you alter your state of consciousness, whether it's meditation, psychedelics, just feeling calm, or my own Charles Bonnet syndrome. If I can experience it in my shabby little living room, anyone can experience it anywhere. I'm not saying, obviously that's because of Charles Bonnet syndrome, but you get my point.
mm.
It's your state of mind that is more important than the place, even though there are certain special places.
And it's finding those magical places that put you in that state as well, like with you with going to a local park that you have a connection with, and having that connection with a singular tree that you go back to time and time again, and just observing, slowing yourself down and observing in nature is a massive way of being able to connect with a fey realm. We're going to go back right to the very start, and this is going to be a convoluted, and I love this word that you use, segue into. You have an article that has been featured in a book edited by Joshua Cutchins, who we interviewed. Fantastic guy. You can scroll down the videos and watch that video. So I'm going to take it over to you, Neil, and you can tell us about this fantastic book.
Another shameless piece of promotion. That's the second one in the video. It's absolutely outrageous, really, isn't it? I'm not going to say much about it, but here it is. You see that, the light?
Yep, fairy films. We folk
Fairy,
on
Fairy
the.
films, the wee folk on the big screen. So that's been edited, as you say, by Joshua Cutchin. And hold on, I'm going to need to put my. I didn't need my glasses, but I do need my glasses. And so Joshua's edited it and written an article, and it's about fairies and how they're depicted in cinema, basically. And there are lots of great people. Jack Hunter, who we've interviewed
Interviewed.
here before. Simon Young, who we've interviewed. I'm not going to go through them all. You can go and find out. Yeah, Susan Demeter, who's great. Um, and me.
And
You know,
you,
obviously the most important article in the
of
book.
course.
And my article was called "Handmaidens of the Eternal: Consciousness and Death in Photographing Fairies." And
Not that's a chunky title there. That is a
yeah,
chunky title.
that's what you call a sexy title, isn't it?
It's a sexy title.
Uh, and that's about, I'm sure many of the viewers will have seen the 1997 film, um, Photographing Fairies, which is one of my favorites. It's superbly done and just so watchable. Again, difficult to get hold of, unfortunately, now because it never got its own DVD release. But I go into quite, so I think it's 8,000 word article, so quite a deep dive into the concepts that are expressed through that film. And as the title suggests, a lot of it is about altered state of consciousness and death. There's a lot of death in Photographing Fairies, um, in a good way. In a good way. I mean, I'm not going to give any spoilers for the film, but the ending is a celebration of death and how it's just a transition from life to another life. That's it. That's sort of main message of the film. So that's it. So Joshua will be pleased for me to be plugging this. And he put a lot of effort. This was a long time in the making, and Joshua went through the mill trying to get this published. I won't bore you with the details, but he had to go through a lot. So kudos to Joshua for doing that and finally getting this book out. And I've now read all the other articles, and they're all really, really great. So it's a book well worth having. So
And where's it
that,
available?
the usual places, all good bookshops, some not so good bookshops. I hate to say go on Amazon, but it's the easiest place to find it. But you'll find it on any website, or you could go on to joshuacutchin.com. I think just search for Joshua Cutchin. It's the first website that'll come up, and he's selling it on his own website. So if you want to avoid the behemothian capitalist corporations, you buy it straight from him, from his website. So yeah.
Brilliant. Brilliant. And I'm sure we'll come up with a million and one other places that we've been that we can do another rundown of fairy places. Like Neil said, if you have had a fairy encounter in a place, or of a special place, we'd love to hear your stories about places that are famous or not famous when it comes to fairy encounters. So I want to say thank you very much to listening for a little while. Yeah, I'm going home. I'm done.
Have you had your caffeine today?
You know what? No, I'm going to tell you this before we go off air. I've been doing a raw diet at the minute, a raw vegan diet. This is what it does
Look,
to
look
you.
what happens. Look what happens. Let that be a
Exactly.
lesson to you.
You try and be healthy and on herbal tea. I need a cup of coffee. That's what I need. But thank you for watching. And we will be on very, very soon, hopefully with some new guests coming up and some new subject matter. So thank you, Neil, and we'll speak soon.